My tech startups first big revenue is going to come from the US government. That's what I'm projecting. That's what I've been saying in my pitches to investors. And one example from history, tech history, that I've been citing is when Oracle was this tiny startup in the Bay Area, and they won a contract with the CIA to build a database. Nothing, just the same stuff that they were doing for smaller private sector clients, but now they won a contract to build a database for the Central Intelligence Agency. No Jason Bourne stuff, just you know, good old software. And I cite that example because uh, that's when Oracle became this big company, and after that, it attracted many bigger corporate clients too. And my pitch is that although what I really, really want to do is tackle the credit problem, the lack of financial services problem for the dollar a day people who live on $1 a day, $2 a day. That cannot be my first step because that's just it's too big, too ambitious, requires much larger resources than I can hope to get uh, during the initial stages. So I've been saying that's step three. That's a few years down the line. Even step two, we'll have to wait. But the first big step I want to take is, and basically, we're talking about the next generation social network. Web 1 gave us email was the first social network. I remember uploading and downloading photos. We used to send pictures over email, and it took forever to upload. And when you received it, it took forever to download. But that's how we did it. That's how people did it, and that was the social network of Web 1. And it's still here, although we don't share pictures over email. Uh, Email is still here, and I'm glad. And so, I don't think, at the end of the day, you're looking at Facebook and Twitter going away, the Web 2 social networks going away. In fact, Twitter is hot right now. Like, of all the Web 3 people, that's where they choose to communicate uh, openly, right? Briefly, openly. And uh, so uh, I have to use this metaphor because Facebook, Twitter, they are Web 2 products. And so just like jumping from email, this primitive social network, to Facebook and Twitter and other similar social networks, it was a quantum jump. It was a qualitatively different experience. Okay, whatever that was, whatever that jump was, now do at least times 10. And that's what a Web 3 social network will be. Again, I have to come back to the Facebook and Twitter example because when I did democracy work for Nepal in 2005, I was the only full timer among Nepalese in the US, then estimated to be maybe 200,000. And all I had was a mailing list and a blog. And at the time, that was the largest Nepali mailing list in the world. I was using the free service by Google, Google Groups, and I was collecting emails. And I remember this politician friend of mine in 2005. He had just come to New York City from Nepal for maybe a week, 2 weeks, and he said everybody in Kathmandu who has an email address gets emails from you, or at least everybody that he knew who had an email address seemed to get emails from you. So my point is, like I did democracy work in 2005 for a small size country, and I have to point this out. I was inspired by the Orange Revolution that had happened in Ukraine in 2004. When they did that in Egypt, they were using Facebook and Twitter, and it was so much more effective than mailing list. And I mean, an email using email requires this high level of literacy, and so it's not the best user interface. You want something very intuitive, and I think the best digital interfaces are those that don't even require literacy. It's all symbols and graphics, and anybody can use it, or minimal literacy. So I bring the Egypt example because people who launched Facebook and people who launched Twitter, they did not launch them with the express intention of toppling Hosni Mubarak in Egypt. That was not in the plan. And I'm not saying Facebook and Twitter are even the decisive reason why Mubarak had to go. Like the reason Mubarak had to go was because the people in Egypt decided it was time for him to go. They came out into the streets, they took over a public square, and they stayed there until he left, right? So, power to the people, right? But Facebook and Twitter were, I think, amazing tools that the people used for that movement. And I bring that example because my intention is to build the most sophisticated digital tools made possible by the new technology, the Web3 technologies, and put that at the service of the Russian democracy movement. Again, like it is for the Russian people, the global Russian population, starting with the Russian diaspora, to make the move. It is a decision, it is the will of the people, the collective decision. It is for them to make or not. But the digital tools that I hope to build, just like when the only way you could write an essay was on paper, many fewer people did that. And then we had the typewriter, which made it relatively easier. But today, with word processing, it is so much easier. With all the help you get with spelling and grammar, even as you are writing it, or autocomplete. When you are composing Gmail is like, hey, maybe this is what you want to say, and they suggest a phrase or sometimes even a sentence, and we just pick it and run with it, right? It has become so much easier. People reply to emails more these days because Gmail tries to suggest, maybe this is what you want to say in the response, right? And you click, and the reply has been composed. So with what my point is, because we have word processing today, many more people write essays and papers than they did when the only option was to write it on paper. And so building sophisticated digital tools will make a Russian democracy movement more likely. That's what I'm betting on. And for my tech startup, that's a business move. I'm at a Starbucks right now. That might explain some of the background noise. It's a wonderful place to get some work done. Like you are by yourself, but you're not really by yourself, and all those other people who are around you, they kind of add to the creative environment. And a little black coffee does not hurt once in a while. I think I have always liked Starbucks more than I ever liked WeWork. It's only because Starbucks doesn't have that freedom. And you can come in and you have like more thing with it. So I was saying that you know it is for the global Russian population starting with the diaspora, and I see the huge gap because I don't see any street action. If what Putin is doing is so bad in Ukraine, if if Putin is such a dictator, then why aren't Russians in Berlin and London and Paris and New York City and wherever? Why aren't they marching? You know, granted, there's that fear factor that you don't want to be seen. I'm wearing that anonymous because with the safe cities of the world where freely speaking or freely organizing or coming out in the streets to protest is a complete non-issue. Not really nobody cares, nobody's offended. People might applaud you for it. And that decision of protesting, that is for the Russian diaspora to start. I'm not Russian. I'm just a friend of Russia. I'm a friend of Ukraine, and primarily I'm a tech entrepreneur. I'm trying to build products, generate some revenue, and these super sophisticated digital tools I intend to build, put at the Russian democracy movement, put at the service of the Russian democracy movement, will basically be a template for a next generation social network. The same social network that will also allow me to offer Estonia like digital government services in country like Nepal, or it's the same social network that will allow me to solve the credit problem that the dollar a day people who live on a dollar per day, they have today. It's the same basic template. So the social network that I'll build for the Russian democracy movement will have that same foundation, will also allow me to do these bigger things for step two or step three. And you can do the math. The US government alone, not even counting countries like Britain and Germany. I mean, Germany, because of what Putin did in Ukraine, Germany got alarmed and decided to spend $100 billion on defense. That's expense. That's money that would have gone elsewhere if Putin had not done what he did in Ukraine. This flagrant. This is how is this different from Saddam going into Kuwait? Saddam went for the oil. Putin has done the same thing. It's about the resources in Donbass, not the people. Uh, that's why he has been so destructive in Donbass, absolutely destroying the landscape. Because what he really cares about is not about the people that are above the ground, but the mineral resources that are below the ground, right? So I don't know. Putin is just Saddam with the WMDs. Maybe that's the only difference. Anyways, the U.S. government alone has spent more than $50 billion in Ukraine so far. That's a lot of money. And if Iraq is any suggestion, or if Afghanistan is any suggestion, that number could go up a lot and pretty fast. It could go in the hundreds of billions. And this parallel that I draw here in 2005, when I was working for the democracy movement in Nepal, there was this raging Maoist insurgency across Nepal. The government of Nepal had become absent in about 80% of the country, and the US ambassador and the US establishment through him kept arguing that the only option was a strong military option against the Maoists. That's it. That's the only way to move forward. That is the realistic way to tackle the situation. Between the dictator monarch and the Democrats could be organized. We have to stay together and together fight a military battle against the Maoists. And I strongly disagreed with that. I said, no, you know, more war is not the option. There is a political solution, and that political solution has to be sought, and that requires that the Maoists announce an unilateral ceasefire, and there's an alliance between the Maoists and the Democrats to topple the king and then take the country peacefully towards a constituent assembly and a new constitution, which is what ended up happening. And I have a strong bias for political solutions. I have a strong bias for people action. I'm not saying, never say never about the military options. I mean, when you are attacked, like Putin attacked Ukraine, Ukraine doesn't really have a choice. I'm glad it's getting the military help it's getting, and I was happy when uh, Ukraine was given these missiles that change the trajectory of the war. That's there. But my point is, that cannot be the decisive push. The military push cannot be the primary driver. The primary push always has to be political. And the biggest political move anybody could make, or many people could make, would be to organize a democracy movement first outside Russia, getting the Russian population, energized, ultimately to bring out half a million people out into the streets of Moscow, kind of a color revolution for Russia to topple Putin. And my tech startup would like to build very many sophisticated digital tools for that movement, and we expect the US government to pay us upwards of $100 million for that work, which is much, much less than the 50 billion already spent.